Welcome to FedScoopTV. I'm Corey Bennett, and I'm here today with Rowan Gould, the Deputy Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Rowan, thanks so much for chatting with us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Let's just start off, let's go back to the beginning. Tell me a bit about your first government job. What did you learn from that experience?
Well, when you start working for the federal government, you never know what to expect. I have a PhD in fish diseases and fish biology, and that's all I ever wanted to do in my career, was do that. And so I got on for my first job at the old Western Fish Disease Laboratory in Seattle, Washington. And it was an amazing experience. You go in there, and I had the job that I was going to retire in, because it was the perfect job for my training. And as time went on, it was the perfect job. But then's when you realize that change happens, and that you realize that there's a bigger, better world out there. And you also realize that you have influence that's a little bit beyond what you expected. I expected to be diagnosing fish diseases in fish hatcheries. And I ended up working with people that cared about habitats, cared about conservation, cared about fish, wildlife, birds, anything like that. And so all of a sudden it opened up a new arena for me. So my initial job was an eye-opening, and it just drove me on to bigger and better things, because I realized there's a lot of potential out there.
Definitely. I mean, it seems like, you learn change happens, but can you look back and notice anything specifically that you did, any part of your job that you did that kind of influenced your future success moving forward?
Yes. Part of my job was to work with the local fish and wildlife interest groups, stakeholders, and universities. And I thought I was going to be working with universities almost exclusively in a research arena, because that's what my first job was, research. But I found out that I was working with other folks with different interests. They still cared about what I did, and they were related, but like the local Indian reservations. I was involved in hatcheries and their involvement in hatcheries. I was working with state fish and game agencies. And that experience alone taught me that there's a lot of people out there that see the world in a lot of different ways. And you have to appreciate that there's a lot of different points of view out there.
So I'm sure there were times you felt overwhelmed at that first job with the government.
Right.
If there was someone that you just met who is in their first job with the government, they're feeling a bit overwhelmed, what kind of advice would you give them based on your experience?
You need to be willing to try different things. And you have to be willing to meet different people. You have to be willing to just say to yourself, I'm going to make a difference, and I'm going to do something that's going to benefit the American people. In my case, I work for the federal government. That's my focus. I want to benefit the American people. And you just have to kind of be yourself and get out there and be a little bit more positive than young people normally are. I was not a very good speaker. I was very nervous in front of a camera. So I literally went out and took a few courses on how to get in front of a camera and how to talk to people and be a little bit more comfortable in those kind of settings. Be a little bit more outgoing and positive. Helped me out a lot. But the realization that I needed to do that came with the kind of work I had to do to be really effective in my job.
So this is kind of advice that you would impart on someone else. What about advice that you received early in your career? Can you pinpoint a piece of advice that really kind of stuck with you?
3 things.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk to a lot of young people in my job right now. Fish and Wildlife Service has a great leadership development program and great training programs at our National Conservation Training Center. So I get out there and talk to younger people, and I usually tell them 3 things that I've learned from other people. The first is to be positive, because being positive means people want to be around you. You have a rapport with people. People want to be around people that are positive. It almost equates to charisma. The second thing I learned was you need to be a good partner. You've got to realize that people, like I said before, people see things different than you do sometimes. In my business, everybody that I know likes fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitat.
Of course.
They like them in different ways. Some like to hunt them, some like to fish them, some like to take pictures of them, some like them just out there because they like the existence of them, but they all like them. But they see it in a different way. They see what they like in a different way. You have to accept that and be good partners with those people. And you've got to be, here's the advice, be the first one to go to them and say, I want to see the world through your lens. Let's go look out of your window. I want to understand where you're coming from, because that equates to, you've got charisma, they want to be around you, you go talk to them from that perspective, and you create trust. And that's what you want to end up with, the trust of the people that you're working with.
So this is good advice.
It's just advice for those
Yeah.
folks.
What about good resources? What are some resources that either you used coming up, or that you,
Right.
you tell young government employees to use themselves?
Right. Take advantage of training opportunities wherever you can. Training opportunities to talk with people, to deal with people, training opportunities to be a better manager, supervise, how to work with people in a more effective way, how to motivate people. There's all kinds of courses out there that you can take to learn that sort of thing. You don't necessarily have to be a person like that. Those are things you can learn. You can actually train yourself to be good at those sorts of things. It's a good opportunity when you can have it and get it to go out there and take advantage of those resources. So the training is one thing. The other advice I have is get out of your comfort zone and try to be part of something that is a little bit bigger than yourself, so that you have to stretch a little bit to be effective in that environment, or able to communicate, or be with people that are at maybe at a level in their career that you're not used to working in. Avail yourself to those people. Get yourself in a position where you can meet them and talk to them, and take advantage of the fact that they can give you advice, just like I'm giving advice right now. And then the other thing I tell young folks is you learn from the past, you operate in the present, but you shoot for the future, because everything's changing right now. The world is changing environmentally. We know that for a fact. The world is changing demographically. We know that for a fact. The cultures, the environments that people work in, they're changing constantly. It's much more complex. So the advice is, think in the future. Learn from the past, operate in the present, but have a vision of where you want to go. Vision is so important. It really connects you with people, because people will say, that person understands what's going on. That person sees the world as it's going to be. I want to be with that person. I want to be involved with that person, because they have a clear understanding of the world as it's going to be. And if you do those three things, if you are positive, you have good partnering skills, and you have a good vision for the future and can offer advice and suggestions on how to get there, you're going to do well. I don't care if it's in a federal job or a private job, you're going to do very well.
Fair enough, federal or private, but let's talk about federal.
Right.
You know, if you're trying to figure out what your vision is, why should it perhaps include the federal government? Why work for the government?
When you get your first job, as I indicated, you realize that you affect people. Federal government jobs affect people. Even if you're coming in as a microbiologist developing vaccines for fish or diagnosing fish diseases, the products of your work eventually affects economies, affects people's lives, and it can always be for the better. When you work in the federal government, your life really means something. I'm convinced of it. There's a lot of negative things out there right now. That's untoward. It's not true. Federal government employees can have a very positive effect on America, American economy, American way of life. And you see that when you first get into one of these jobs, and it'll grab you. And your mom's proud of you, your dad's proud of you, your wife's proud of you, your kids are proud of you because you're doing something important. That's what made federal employment such a positive experience for me. And that's why the changes that I'm trying to affect in the federal government myself comes from that understanding that what we do is important and affects people and always for the better if you do your job well.
We've talked a bit about the past, a bit in the abstract.
Yeah.
Let's get to some of the projects that you're working on now. Tell me a bit about your current projects, moving forward, what you're going to be working on. Let's get a sense of the present and perhaps the future.
Well, as I indicated before, I care about my job. I care about the Fish and Wildlife Service. I care about its mission. And so I want to leave a legacy that's going to make the place where I work, the mission of the Fish and Wildlife Service, a better mechanism, a tool to make this country better. And I'm focusing on diversity in the workplace. Obviously, like I said, demographics are changing. We live in a world right now where budgets are challenging. But if we don't get the federal government in a position where it is unequivocally looking like America in 25, 30, or 40, or 50 years from now, then as an entity that isn't moving that direction, like the Fish and Wildlife, we will become irrelevant. And relevancy is everything that we're about right now. If we want kids, if we want people, if we want changing demographics in this country to care about what I care about, fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitat, our agency has to look like America. And so I'm spending a lot of time with our senior leadership trying to make the changes necessary that will get us there. It's funny. It's called the business case for diversity. This America we live in has a representative form of government. People look at those representatives and take their cue in what they're going to support in government. If you don't look like America, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, you're not going to have that representation, and you're not going to have support in the budget process, and you will wither and fly away.
I agree with you more. Rowan, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
My pleasure.
Once again, for FedScoopTV, I'm Corey Bennett.